Welcome to our channel. In today's video, we will be taking a look at a suspense thriller film in which a megalomaniacal scientist takes advantage of the success of his experiment to win over a girl. The Hollow Man is a movie that is based on the main concept of the book The Invincible Man by H.G. Wells. Dr. Sebastian Cain, the protagonist of the movie, is brilliant at his work and has been chosen along with a few other great scientists to work on a project that would benefit the military. Dr. Sebastian Cain is a great scientist, but power and dominance is something that he always craves. Dr. Sebastian Cain is not a regular scientist, but a molecular biologist who is working on creating an invincibility serum for the US military. Apart from creating this serum, he was also asked to look for an antidote to this serum that can make an invincible living visible. Dr. Sebastian Cain is determined to make the serum work and has spent days and nights for a span of 4 years to come up with the serum. The project is kept a secret, as the amount of harm it could generate if the whole world knew it could be dangerous. Hence, Sebastian and his team work undercover in a top-secret hidden lab that was provided by the military to him and his staff members. The lab is under very high protections and can be only accessed by the scientists who are working on this project. The current project that he has and his colleagues were working on involved working on a specimen that was basically a trial subject. The test subject that they were using was a female gorilla that they named Isabel. While experimenting on this gorilla, they discovered the concept of phase shifting, which was quite significant to the project that they were working on. The phase shifting would help the living organism turn invincible, following which they would have to be phased back to their old visible selves. The problem that these bunch of scientists were facing included being able to turn the organism invincible, but failing to turn it back to its visible state. However, after many trials and errors, Dr. Sebastian was able to reconfigure the molecular model of a protein in the serum that helped get their test subjects its visibility back. After making this breakthrough discovery, he informs his colleagues about this discovery. Another thing that we forgot to mention is that Dr. Sebastian has a sick infatuation with one of his colleagues, Dr. Linda McKay. She also happens to be his ex-girlfriend, but little did he know and was hitting it off with another colleague of theirs, who goes by the name Dr. Matt Kensington. Some other scientists who Dr. Sebastian is working with on this project include veterinarians Sarah Kennedy and Carter Abbey, and the technicians Frank Chase and Janice Walton. So, once all of the team members are informed about the discovery that Dr. Sebastian made, they all are immediately on cloud 9. To celebrate this breakthrough discovery, they decide to celebrate their win with a fancy dinner. Even though Dr. Sebastian must feel elated with this achievement, he feels quite the opposite. In fact, he is quite sad, and he finally found the solutions to such a big problem that he was unsure how he would spend the rest of his days with no big problems to solve. That's when Dr. Sebastian decides to keep the discovery to himself and plans on convincing his colleagues to keep the secret amongst themselves. Dr. Howard Kramer, who happens to be Dr. Sebastian's old professor, was overlooking this project, but Dr. Sebastian decides to lie to his professor too, so as to keep the serum away from the military. Apart from not telling Dr. Kramer, he also decides to force Linda and Matt into lying to Sarah, Carter, Frank, and Janice. The lie included telling them that Dr. Kramer has given the green signal to take this project to the human testing phase. They believe his word, and Dr. Sebastian's put himself out there to become the first human subject to test the invincibility serum on. Dr. Sebastian consumes the portions and successfully turns invincible after going through a painful phase-shifting stage. It was so painful that it knocked him out cold for a good 17 hours. When Dr. Sebastian regains consciousness, he realizes that he can see through his eyelids. At the point in time, though the sunlight prickles at his body, he realizes that the serum has worked. He is elated and decides to work on running some clinical trials to further understand the effects of the serum. He is overwhelmed with the results until he tries to revert himself back to a visible state. On doing so several times, he fails every single time. In fact, at one point, he almost killed himself trying to turn visible. The scientist's colleagues come to know that Dr. Sebastian is stuck in this state and decide to help him out. The first thing that they helped him out with involves knowing where he is. So in order to do so, they built a latex mask for him so that he could wear it around the lab. All the scientists are engrossed in finding a solution to reverse Dr. Sebastian's current state. Dr. Matt finally comes up with the promising solutions but is disappointed when the computer simulation fails. Dr. Sebastian is stuck in the lab for the next few days and he starts to get quite impatient. He misses the outdoors and decides to go against the rule of his colleagues and steps out of the lab. He decides to head to his apartment so that he could grab a few items with which he could be entertained in the lab. While grabbing a few books, CDs, and a quick snack, he happens to lay his eyes on his neighbor. He then proceeds to while he is still cloaked in invincibility. By this point in time, Linda is made aware of Dr. Sebastian's absence and looks in his apartment, but all she finds are his clothes, as well as the latex mask that they made for him. Dr. Sebastian makes it back to the lab only to find Dr. Linda, who threatens to tell Dr. Kramer if he ever leaves the lab again. Dr. Sebastian does not pay heed to Dr. Linda's threats and begins working on another project that involves looking into the properties of his heat signature. This helps. Dr. Sebastian fools his colleagues into believing that he's in the lab. Dr. Sebastian goes out of the lab to see Dr. Linda, only to find her quite intimately involved with Dr. Matt. On seeing this, Dr. Sebastian gets infuriated and smashes their bedroom window. Frank, who was supposed to be keeping a watch on Dr. Sebastian, is contacted by Dr. Linda. Frank is convinced that Dr. Sebastian was in the lab. However, that wasn't the truth. In fact, Frank was being fooled with a blatant illusion. Dr. Sebastian is heavily infuriated by what he saw earlier, and he returns back to the lab. In all that rage, he hears a bark from a dog that seems to be invincible, and due to all that rage, he kills the dog with his bare hands. The rest of the team concludes that Dr. Sebastian has gone rogue and that they must involve Dr. Kramer immediately. Dr. Kramer is briefed on all the happenings and is quite disappointed in the team. He fires all of them and decides to inform the military and get them involved. But Dr. Sebastian, in his invincible state, finds out about this and tricks Dr. Kramer into leaving the residence. He then proceeds to drown him in the swimming pool in a rather grotesque way. Dr. Sebastian has bigger plans for the next day and disables all the devices that are used in the lab, including the elevators and phones. Dr. Sebastian has gone diabolical and decides to end the lives of all of his colleagues. He finds Janice, who he by strangling her with an ivy line. He then stuffs her lifeless corpse in a locker. The rest of the team knows that Dr. Sebastian is up and decides to hit him with a tranquilizer gun before he one else. Dr. Matt tries to hit Dr. Sebastian with a shot, but Dr. Sebastian decides to create a distraction where he throws Carter towards a steel bar that cuts through his carotid artery. Carter manages to survive and is found by Frank and Sarah, but he later on dies when he bleeds out. Dead Sarah is then found in a walk-in freezer. Frank tries to expose Dr. Sebastian's body by spraying a fire extinguisher at him, but instead he is attacked by Dr. Sebastian with a crowbar. Dr. Sebastian then stabs Dr. Matt in the chest, following which he locks him with Linda in the freezer so as to let them freeze to death. Dr. Linda tries to save Dr. Matt from dying and manages to open the locked door with a device she constructs using a defibrillator, while Dr. Linda and Dr. Matt make it out alive. Dr. Sebastian is busy creating nitroglycerin so as to destroy the whole lab. That's when Dr. Linda comes to rescue and spews flame from a flamethrower at Dr. Sebastian, due to which he gets burned intensely. Dr. Matt then attacks Dr. Sebastian with a crowbar. Dr. Sebastian manages to get the crowbar on his hand, only to electrocute himself with it as it touches a live fuse. That's when Dr. Sebastian's internal organs starts turning visible. Dr. Matt and Dr. Linda tries to escape the lab through an elevator shaft before the entire lab is destroyed. That's when Dr. Sebastian returns back and kisses Dr. Linda rather passionately, as he felt that was the best end a man could ever ask for. The lab is left in flames and Dr. Sebastian burns down with it. The ambulances and medics are left to heal these two lucky scientists who were lucky enough to escape the wrath of a mad scientist.